What if today God wanted to remind you that your story is still unfolding? It does not matter if lately some pages have been hard to understand. It doesn't matter either if your path changed direction without warning. As long as God stays with you, nothing is truly lost. Maybe you got this far looking for an answer, a sign, or just a little peace. Before we talk about any problems, I want to leave truth in your heart. The Lord has not walked away from you. He is still by your side. His presence does not depend on everything going well. It doesn't fade when doubts creep in, nor does it pull back, because an answer is taking longer than expected. God remains even on those days when you don't know how to make sense of what you're going through. That's why this is not a message to spend minutes reminding you of everything that hurts. Your heart already knows its own battles. Today we're here to talk about what is still alive, of what can still bloom, and of everything God is still building even if it's not visible yet. Some chapters seem confusing while we are in the middle of them. We only catch a glimpse of fragments. A door that closed a conversation that changed things, a time of waiting that dragged on longer than expected, or a plan that didn't take the shape you had imagined. From where we stand, those events can seem completely disconnected. God, however, sees the entire story. He knows the connection between one season and the next. He knows why certain paths had to change. And He understands what He is shaping inside of you as you try to find clarity. The Lord knows how to work with the pages you wish you could tear out. He doesn't use them to shame you, but to show you that His grace can still write something new, even after the hardest moments. Maybe you've spent a long time looking at your life through the lens of what is missing. You think about what hasn't arrived yet, on what didn't get resolved, or on the plans that still haven't taken shape. Yet, while you are focusing on what's missing, God is also producing growth. You have learned things you didn't understand before. The way you pray has changed. You started to recognize better what steals your peace. Even your faith, though, some days it feels weary, has roots it didn't have before. Not all progress makes noise. So don't measure His faithfulness only by what you can see today. Remember the times He held you when you thought you couldn't go on. Look at those seasons that felt endless while you were living through them, but now are part of your testimony. If God held you before His hand has not lost its power, if He was with you when you had no clarity, He will also remain with you right now. You are not walking toward the future alone. Even if you don't know the next chapter yet, you know the author. That doesn't erase all of your questions, but it can be enough to keep hope burning. Today, you can begin to look at the present from a different perspective. Perhaps you're not facing a ruined story, but rather standing before a part that is not finished yet. That silence that troubles you so much might not be proof that God left, but rather the space where something is being prepared far from your sight. If you want to turn this truth into a decision of faith, leave a like and write in the comments, "My story is still in God's hands." Don't just type it out automatically. Do it as someone who stops treating this moment like a final sentence and begins to trust the author once again. What you see right now is not the whole story. There are still paths to discover. And on every single one of them, God will keep reminding you that you never had to walk alone. There are nights when your body is exhausted, but your mind just won't sleep. Everything around you seems quiet, while inside there's a flood of questions, what-ifs, memories, and imaginary conversations. You try to rest, but your thoughts keep looping back to the exact same place. You wonder what will happen, how long this season will last, and if you'll ever feel that peace again that used to come so naturally. It is very possible that nobody even notices. You go about your day taking care of your responsibilities, replying to messages, talking with people, and doing whatever it takes to keep life moving forward. From the outside, you look completely fine, but there is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot cure, because it is not just in your body. It lives deep down in that part of your soul that has been carrying so many uncertainties for far too long, without knowing where to put them down. Sometimes you can't even put into words what you are feeling. It's not outright sadness, but there is no real joy either. You aren't completely hopeless, even if it's hard to look at the future with excitement. You get up, you push through, you get things done, but something inside feels distant, as if a part of your heart is waiting for some sign to finally breathe freely again. That waiting can leave a strange emptiness inside. You look at your life and know that there are still things to be grateful for. You know God has been good to you in so many moments. And yet that one unresolved area ends up casting its shadow over everything else. Your mind gets so focused on what is left unfinished that it forgets how to receive what is already present. Then the guilt creeps in. You ask yourself why you can't just feel better while you're still so worried even after praying, or how someone with faith can have so many conflicting thoughts. Maybe you're hard on yourself, telling yourself you need to trust more, be more grateful, or just stop overthinking. But the heart cannot be put in order by scolding it. It needs truth, patience, and a safe space where it can open up about what is deep inside. It's possible this current situation has reopened an old wound. A delay today can bring back painful memories of being abandoned. A bit of criticism might hit a deep-seated feeling of not being good enough that started years ago. A little uncertainty can trigger the exact same fear you felt during another season of your life when everything changed without warning. When a new experience gets tangled up with an old wound, the weight seems so much heavier than anyone else could ever understand. You aren't just reacting to what's happening today. You're also feeling the echoes of past pages in your story. That's why it isn't fair to expect an instant solution from yourself. Before you can move forward, you need to recognize which voice is taking up too much space inside of you. What thought keeps repeating? And what part of your past is trying to convince you that everything will end the same way again? Maybe the real struggle isn't just about what's happening on the outside. There might be something deep inside you trying to write the ending before God even reveals the next chapter. When someone lives for too long, under constant pressure, they start getting tangled up in their own thoughts. Fear stops feeling like a passing emotion and starts looking like a trustworthy warning. Guilt no longer acts simply as a sign that something needs to be fixed. Instead, it turns into a voice that questions your whole identity. And anxiety, it tries to convince you that staying worried is the only way to protect yourself from another. Disappointment, that is how certain inner voices slowly eat away at your faith without ever needing to scream. Fear whispers that you shouldn't trust because you might get hurt all over again. It reminds you of the times things went wrong and uses those painful experiences as proof that your future will go down the exact same road. It doesn't show you new possibilities. It only repeats old dangers. Guilt plays a different game. It goes back to past decisions, forcing you to judge them with the wisdom you have today. It asks why you didn't act differently, how you could let certain things happen, or why it took you so long to see what now seems so obvious. Then comes comparison. You look at someone else's life and you feel like everyone is moving ahead while you're still stuck. You see their success, their celebrations, their open doors. But you don't see the long, painful process behind it all. Even so, a single snapshot becomes an unfair ruler to measure your own journey. That's when your mind starts drawing painful conclusions. God helps everyone but me. It's too late for me. My story has nothing new to offer. Or, I'll never get out of this phase. These thoughts don't always sound like spiritual struggles. Sometimes they just disguise themselves as being realistic. You tell yourself you're just accepting the facts, when in reality you're viewing your whole world through the lens of your wound. You mistake caution for pessimism, humility for self-loathing, and resignation for peace. That's why you need to examine what's going on inside you, without treating every single thought as absolute truth. The mind produces ideas, memories, and what-ifs constantly. Some of them are helpful. Others are born from exhaustion, from fear, or from painful past experiences. Just because you feel something deeply doesn't mean your interpretation is right. When a friend takes a little too long to reply, your mind immediately assumes you don't matter to them anymore. When a door stays closed, your mind insists it will never open. None. You make a mistake and guilt tells you that you always ruin everything. Watch how a specific situation quickly turns into an absolute statement. That mechanism wears down your faith because it reduces all the possibilities to a single dark version. Hope doesn't deny the risk or manufacture perfect endings. It simply refuses to accept that the worst-case scenario is the only story available. One of the voices that weakens your faith the most appears when you start demanding that you should already be completely fine. You look at the time that has passed and you judge yourself because you still have difficult days. You think a wound should have healed by now, that you shouldn't still feel fear, or that your prayers should be stronger. Yet, human journeys don't follow perfect schedules. A situation can stop hurting every single day before it stops affecting your decisions. Later, you might be able to remember it without feeling like you're going back to that same place. Each step is progress, even if it's not yet the complete freedom you long for. Don't let your impatience with yourself destroy the growth that already exists. Before you go on, take a moment to look at what is occupying your mind the most. Out of everything that worries you, what burden are you willing to place in God's hands today? Write it down briefly in the comments, even if you can only describe it with a single word. My family, my future, my health, this decision, or my fear. That simple act won't magically solve the problem, but it can mark an inner decision to stop carrying it completely alone. God does not expect a perfect surrender. Your mind might start worrying about it again. Later, you can hand it over once more. Faith is also strengthened through those moments of return. Something important begins to happen when you learn to recognize the voices inside you. Fear loses some of its power when it stops, seeming like an absolute truth. Guilt begins to quiet down when you recognize the difference between learning and condemning yourself. Comparison fades away when you look again at the path God is building with you. You may not see an answer on the outside yet, but a new kind of clarity might be growing inside you. And when God begins to illuminate the way you look at your story, something is already shifting even if you can't quite name it yet. Esther didn't grow up imagining that one day she would have to risk her life to protect an entire nation. Before she ever reached the palace, her story was already marked by a deep loss. She was an orphan raised by Mordecai, a relative who took her in as his own daughter. Her life didn't begin with privilege or certainty. It began with a loss in a home put back together after heartbreak, and with the need to learn how to keep moving forward in a life she hadn't chosen. Years later, King Ahasuerus sought a new queen. Many young women were brought to the palace, including Esther. Suddenly, this girl who had grown up so far from the halls of power began to live within a completely different structure. We could look at that part of the story and think that everything was resolved. Esther received favor, was chosen, and became queen. Yet, her position didn't eliminate the danger, nor did it allow her to reveal freely every aspect of her identity. Following the guidance of Mordecai, she kept her Jewish heritage a secret. She had reached the palace, but she still didn't know why. This detail is important. Sometimes we see an open door as the end of the story, when in reality it may be just a preparation. We think the answer is simply about reaching a certain place, getting an opportunity, or achieving a position. Only later do we realize that that door also brought a responsibility. While Esther was living in the palace, Mordecai uncovered a plot against the king. He reported what he had heard, and the event was recorded in the royal chronicles. At that moment, he didn't receive any visible reward. The record was simply filed away. It seemed like a minor detail, a line written and forgotten in a book. At the same time, another man began to rise in influence. His name was Haman. He had been given a high position and expected everyone to bow down before him. Mordecai refused, and that refusal sparked an incredibly intense rage. Haman didn't want to punish just Mordecai. He decided to destroy his entire people. He used his close relationship with the king, presenting a distorted version of the facts, and obtained permission to issue a death decree against all the Jews in the empire. When Mordecai heard the news, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth. The threat was no longer some distant possibility. There was a specific date, an official document, and a structure of power backing this destruction. Esther was safe inside the palace, but she wasn't out of danger. Her identity was still the same, even if no one there knew it. That was when Mordecai sent her a message. He asked her to go before the king and beg for mercy for her people. Esther knew the risk. No one could go before the king without being summoned. Doing so could cost them their life unless the king extended his scepter to spare them. What's more, Esther hadn't been called to see the king in 30 days. The door that seemed to have led her to safety suddenly became the very place where she would have to face her greatest fear. Her initial reaction was only human. She remembered the law, the danger, and everything she stood to lose. That was when Mordecai told her something that pierced straight through her comfort. Perhaps she'd come to the royal palace for such a time as this. It wasn't an accusation. It was an invitation to look at her, positioned from a completely different perspective. Esther might have thought that reaching the palace was simply a reward. Now she was beginning to see that it could also be a preparation. Even so, she didn't act impulsively. She asked her people to fast for 3 days. She and her maids would do the same. After that, she would go before the king. Biblical courage isn't the absence of fear. Esther knew she could die. Her courage lay in refusing to let fear make the decision for her. For 3 days, there wasn't a single visible guarantee. She didn't get a letter from the king telling her everything would be fine. There was no spectacular sign confirming the outcome either. Only silence, fasting, and a decision. Then Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner courtyard. Imagine that moment. Every step brought her closer to a door that could mean either acceptance or death. The king saw her and held out the scepter. Esther didn't present her entire request right away. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet, and then she planned a second meeting. Maybe we wonder why she didn't speak up right away. But her wisdom and caution were also part of the process. She didn't confuse courage with haste. She waited for the perfect moment to reveal what lay heavy on her heart. Between the first banquet and the second, something happened that Esther could never have planned. The king couldn't sleep. It seems like such a small detail. A sleepless night inside a palace doesn't seem like enough to change the fate of an entire people. Yet, during that night, the king asked to have the chronicles of the kingdom read to him. Right there, they came across the record of what Mordecai had done some time ago when he uncovered the plot. The king asked what honor and recognition had been given for that service. The answer was none. What seemed forgotten was brought back to mind at the exact moment. Mordecai hadn't chased after a reward, and he hadn't used his deed to demand recognition. The deed sat written in silence until one night when Esther needed things to start changing. The king opened to that exact record. This is one of the most profound details of the story. The book of Esther doesn't directly mention the name of God. It doesn't describe a voice coming down from heaven or a spectacular miracle shattering the laws of nature. And yet every single event begins to connect with a precision that reveals a hidden hand of providence. Esther arrives at that palace. Mordecai uncovers a plot. The deed gets recorded without any reward. Haman plots total destruction. Esther decides to take the risk. The king cannot sleep. The chronicles are open right to the page where Mordecai's name was written. God isn't explicitly mentioned, but his loving care can be felt moving things that no one could have ever planned. Maybe there are seasons in your life that feel just like this book. You don't see any obvious sign, you don't hear a clear answer, and you can't quite see where God is in the midst of everything that's happening. Yet the silence of his name doesn't mean the absence of his hand. At the second banquet, Esther finally spoke up, revealing her true identity and explaining that she and her people had been condemned to destruction. The king asked who had dared to prepare such a thing. Esther pointed at Haman, the man who had built a structure to destroy. Mordecai ended up exposed by his own wickedness. The decree couldn't simply be canceled because of the laws of the empire, but a new order was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves. The story changed direction. The day set for destruction turned into a day of deliverance. Mordecai was honored. Esther used her position to protect others. What seemed like a series of disconnected events began to reveal a purpose. Being an orphan wasn't called good. The danger didn't stop being real. Esther wasn't spared from the need to make a difficult decision. Yet none of those things managed to stop God from using her life. Maybe today you're asking yourself, why are you in a certain place? Why did your path take a direction you don't understand? Or what good are experiences that seem to have no connection to each other? The story of Esther doesn't offer a quick explanation for every loss. It shows us something deeper. Even when God seems silent, he can be connecting details that you still can't see. Maybe there are records that seem forgotten, conversations that led to nothing at the time, skills you gained. During a season, you considered lost relationships, decisions, and lessons that haven't yet revealed their purpose. You never know what sleepless night, what conversation, or what memory might turn a situation around. Nor do you know if the place where you are today carries a responsibility you haven't recognized yet. Esther didn't arrive at the palace with a complete map. Did she understand her mission when the threat appeared? Maybe you too will find the meaning of certain processes only when the time comes to use what you learned. The hidden spiritual detail in this story is exactly that. God can be completely present, even when his name doesn't appear on the scene. He can work in the everyday, in a delay, in a forgotten record, in a door that opens, and in the courage born after 3 days of silence. Maybe right now you only see fragments. Esther didn't know the connection between them all either while they were happening. But as the story moved forward, what seemed random began to show a direction, and maybe something similar is happening to you. Even if you don't yet understand how the pieces will fit together, God may be preparing the moment when what today seems scattered reveals why you were never out of his care. Now let's think of the story of a woman we'll call Marta. Her experience represents what many people go through when a stable season ends unexpectedly. Marta was 46 when she felt that her life had come to a standstill. For almost 20 years, she had worked at the same company. She knew the processes, the clients, and every little detail of her job. Despite the difficulties, that job gave her stability and allowed her to care for her mother, help her children, and keep the household running. One morning, she was called in for a brief meeting. The company was downsizing, and her position was being eliminated. Marta walked out with a small box where she'd placed a few photos, a notebook, and the mug she used every single day. As she walked toward the parking lot, she felt that she wasn't just losing a job. It felt like she was losing a part of her identity. One Sunday, while sorting through papers, she found an old notebook. In it, years ago, she had written down food ideas, recipes, and small plans to sell food from home. She'd always loved to cook, but she never thought that skill could actually support a new chapter in her life. One morning, after saying a very simple prayer, she decided to prepare a few lunches and offer them to people she knew. She didn't start with some big, flashy advertisement. She wrote to 5 people and asked if they would be interested. 3 of them replied. That first week, she only sold a few meals. The effort seemed like too much for such a small result. There was shopping prep work, cleaning, and deliveries. At times, she felt like giving up. But then, a customer recommended her food to other people. Marta started getting orders from nearby offices. She learned how to manage quantities, calculate costs, and use digital tools that used to make her feel insecure. Her children helped her set up a simple web page and take photos. The chapter that seemed to have ended with a box in her hands hadn't erased everything she carried inside. As the months went by, her income still fluctuated, but the small business was already handling regular orders. Marta didn't say that losing her job was a good thing. She still remembered the fear, the uncertainty, and the sleepless nights. But she could see that her story didn't end in that parking lot. God didn't show her the whole plan from the first day. He guided her through an old idea, the help of her children. 3 initial responses and the willingness to start small. You might be waiting for a sign that can change everything instantly when the next chapter might be hidden in something simple that is already right there next to you. It won't always be a business. It could be a conversation, a skill you stopped using, a person who can guide you, or a decision you put off because it doesn't seem big enough. New beginnings don't always arrive with complete certainty. Often they show up through a simple obedience. That may be exactly what God is asking of you today, not to figure out the whole story, but to faithfully focus on the present moment. The complete answer might not be available yet, but it's possible that a concrete action already exists. If this testimony stirred something inside of you, leave a like as a way to say, I still believe that God can open a new chapter. Even if you don't know what it looks like yet, you can keep your heart open. Your miracle might not arrive with a lot of noise. It can start with a tiny idea, an ordinary conversation, or a strength that shows up right when you thought you couldn't try again. There are miracles that no one recognizes at first. They just look like a simple decision. In time, you realize that was the exact moment the whole direction of your story began to change. While you wait to understand what God is writing, you need simple habits to help keep your heart from getting trapped in the noise. The first can be a simple, honest prayer. Don't look for fancy words, and don't try to make a long speech. Tell the Lord exactly where you are. It is okay to admit that you are afraid, that you are tired, or that you just don't understand this season. A genuine prayer does so much more than a perfect phrase spoken without any connection to what you really feel. You can also take a few minutes of silence, not as a spiritual chore, but as a quiet pause to stop reacting to everything around you. Turn off your phone for a moment. Sit quietly and take a slow breath. As you breathe in, remember that God is right here with you. As you let that breath go, let some of that heavy weight leave your body. Breathing slowly doesn't solve your problems, but it can help ease the tension and help your mind see things clearly again. Maybe you just need to step away from the noise. Not every piece of information belongs in your heart. When what you read or watch makes you compare yourself to others, fills you with fear, or brings a sense of urgency, it is time to cut back on how much attention you give them. Staying informed does not mean living in a constant state of panic. Take extra care of the moments right before you sleep. The night is not the time to make final judgments about your entire life. If a worry pops up, write it down and promise yourself to look at it tomorrow. Then you can say a quick prayer. Lord, I leave this in your hands until tomorrow. Finding rest is a vital part of a life that is learning to trust. Over time, these simple pauses will help you recognize what emotion is really there before you react. You might realize that behind your anger is deep exhaustion, or that your urge to rush comes from fear, or that you are carrying a sadness that you need to share with someone you trust. Clarity doesn't always come in a sudden flash of light. Sometimes it slowly emerges as the noise fades away. And in that quiet space, you'll begin to feel that you don't need to fix everything today. You only need to walk with God through the part of your story that is right in front of you. Faith needs to find a home in your everyday life. It cannot just stay in your quiet times of prayer, because most of your life happens while you work, talk, make decisions, handle surprises, and choose how to respond when things don't go as planned. Everyday faith shows up most clearly in how you manage your attention. You might show up to work with a family worry on your mind. You try to focus, but your mind keeps drifting back constantly to that very same thing. Every task feels heavier because part of your energy is wasted worrying about what might happen. Living out your faith in those moments doesn't mean ignoring the problem. It can simply mean pausing for 1 minute, taking a breath and remembering that you don't have to solve the whole situation right now while you do this task. You bring yourself back to what is right in front of you, trusting there will be a proper time to handle the rest. Doing this keeps a single worry from taking over every corner of your life. Social media brings another challenge. Within just a few minutes, you see trips, successes, relationships, houses, projects, and achievements. Everything seems to be moving so fast. When you look back at your own life, things that just moments ago felt valuable can suddenly seem like not enough. Comparison doesn't have to make you feel like you want exactly what someone else has. It is enough to simply make you feel like you're falling behind. In those moments, you might just need to close the app and step back into your own reality. Look at what God is already building, even if it's not obvious yet. A healthier relationship, a mind that is beginning to find peace, and a responsible decision. These also represent growth. Complex decisions often make us long for an absolutely clear sign. You want to know which choice will guarantee that nothing goes wrong, don't you? But you will rarely have that kind of certainty. You can pray, seek advice, gather information, and look at the potential fruits of each path. After that, you will need to make a choice with humility, remembering that God can still guide you if something needs to be adjusted later on. Let me give you an example. Imagine you get a job opportunity with a better salary, but the new pace of life would deeply affect your health, your family, and the peace you are trying so hard to rebuild. The offer isn't bad in itself, and there is no single right answer that works for everyone. Wisdom doesn't just ask how much money you can make. It looks at the real cost, the responsibilities that would suffer, and whether you can truly sustain that choice over the long run. Sometimes an open door is indeed an opportunity. Other times it is simply a test of your discernment. Just because something is possible doesn't mean it's good for you. Living out your faith daily keeps you from making choices based purely on fear or emotion. You might reject something good simply because you're afraid to step out of your comfort zone, or you might say yes too quickly because you feel a need to prove that your life is moving forward. Give important decisions the time they need. Someone else's sense of urgency doesn't have to become your immediate obligation. You have the right to ask for space to think, pray, and seek clarity. Within your family, maybe you've grown used to being the one who fixes everything. You take the calls, organize everything, and carry the emotional weight of everyone else's problems. Your intentions come from a place of love, but you end up completely exhausted. Having faith doesn't mean trying to take God's place in the lives of the people you love. You can walk alongside others, guide them, and offer help. But there are certain decisions you just can't make for someone else. Placing that person in the hands of the Lord doesn't mean you don't care. It's recognizing that your own strength has its limits. You also need to let others step in. Asking for help might feel uncomfortable because you learn to equate strength with doing it all on your own. But a strong life isn't one that never needs support. It's one that recognizes when a burden should no longer be carried alone. Everyday wisdom means setting boundaries. You can say no without spending minutes defending your choice. It's possible to help with a part of it without taking on the whole burden. You can also hold off on giving an answer when you're tired and you know you won't be able to think clearly. At first, guilt might creep in, especially if other people were used to you always being available. Feeling uncomfortable doesn't always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it just shows you're breaking an old habit. In your everyday life, you also need to learn to enjoy things. Maybe you think you only have the right to rest once everything is solved. But there will always be a new task, an unfinished conversation, or some matter that needs attention if you wait to finish everything before you start living life. Will keep being put on hold. You can enjoy a light conversation, a quiet meal, or a few minutes outdoors without feeling like you're ignoring your responsibilities. Joy doesn't betray what you still have to deal with. Everyday faith isn't built on extraordinary decisions every single day. It is shaped by small daily responses, coming back to the present, listening before you react, resting before you break, acting with integrity, even when no one is watching, and remembering that God is with you while you do an ordinary chore. Maybe the question isn't just what God is writing for your future. You also need to look at how you're participating in the part of the story that's already right in front of you. God's silence can be one of the most unsettling experiences of faith. You pray and don't get a clear answer. You read His Word looking for specific guidance, but no verse seems to offer the explanation you're looking for. You look for a sign, but everything seems to stay exactly the same. Then the question comes up, is God listening? That question doesn't always come from a lack of faith. Sometimes it comes up because you've been waiting for so long, and you just need some proof that your prayer wasn't lost in the void. Silence can feel like distance, but just because there's no immediate answer doesn't mean an absence of His presence. Think of a seed buried under the soil. From the outside, the ground looks completely still. There is no visible sign of growth. Yet deep down, roots are growing, the shell is breaking, and a movement is starting that hasn't reached the surface yet. The ground is not empty. The process is hidden. Just as an example, someone might pray for months for family reconciliation. From their perspective, nothing seems to change. The conversations remain distant, and no one seems willing to take the first step. Meanwhile, God might be working in areas that this person cannot see. Perhaps someone's beginning to question their own behavior. A memory might awaken, repentance, or a new experience could slowly soften the hardness that used to make talking impossible. None of this guarantees that reconciliation will happen exactly as expected. It simply shows that you cannot measure all of God's work solely by the information available to you. It could also be that the silence is protecting you from a hasty decision. You want to choose, but you still don't have all the facts. You want to move forward even though a major part of the truth has not been revealed yet. In these conditions, taking a premature direction could lead you to the wrong conclusion. Waiting isn't always a punishment. It can be a space for reality to bear its fruits. Silence also reveals what image you hold of God. When He doesn't answer the way expected, maybe you start to think He is disappointed, distant, or indifferent. It is possible that this interpretation doesn't come from your relationship with Him, but from human experiences where silence was used as a punishment. Maybe someone stopped speaking to you to control your behavior. Perhaps their affection vanished whenever you made a mistake. Then, without even realizing it, you start to imagine that God pulls away in the exact same way. But the Lord's character does not depend on those human patterns. His silence is not a form of manipulation. It can hold mystery time, and a work that you don't understand yet, but it never means that he has stopped loving you. Jesus also went through moments when the Father's answer didn't appear as an immediate solution. In Gethsemane, he expressed his anguish with complete honesty, asking that the cup be taken from him, if possible. The Father's presence did not stop him from walking that path, but he didn't abandon him in the middle of it either. This doesn't make your situation exactly the same, but it shows that your relationship with God can remain real and true, even when your heart doesn't get the answer it wants. If you've made it this far and want to remember that silence doesn't mean abandonment, leave a comment below. God also works in silence. Don't do it to force the Lord to act. Write it as a way to remind your own heart that it doesn't have all the facts. Maybe one day you will look back and understand why a certain answer needed time. In other situations, perhaps, you will never know every single reason. Faith can also thrive without a complete explanation. You don't have to turn every pain into a solved puzzle. You can say, I don't know why this part happened the way it did, but I know that God didn't leave me alone in it. That certainty can carry you through while the mystery remains. Silence doesn't necessarily contain an emptiness. It can hold the invisible beginning of what will come next. The waiting doesn't leave a person exactly the same. It can harden you, make you anxious, and make you see every single day as a loss. Yet, when you go through it with God, it can also bring about a maturity that would never have been born through instant answers. At first, you wait with urgency. Every day feels like a test. You look for signs, count the days, and search for any little detail that confirms that things are about to change. Your hope depends almost entirely on how close the result feels. As the months pass, something needs to change. You can't live forever suspended waiting on a single prayer. That is when faith begins to ask a deeper question. It no longer wonders only when it will happen, but also how. Can I live close to God while I'm still waiting? That question doesn't take away the desire. It simply places it within a broader life. Just as an example, imagine a woman who's been waiting for years for one of her children to return to the faith. At first, every single conversation turns into an attempt to convince him. Every decision her son makes stirs up fear, and their relationship begins to revolve entirely around this one issue. Over time, she realizes that she cannot control the heart of another person. She keeps praying and keeps the door open, but she learns to listen without turning every encounter into a sermon. She chooses to love without chasing, and to trust that God can speak in places where her own words can no longer reach. The situation on the outside might not have changed yet, but the waiting has matured her way of loving. She no longer spends every day trying to take God's place. This transformation doesn't guarantee a specific outcome, but it frees her heart from an impossible burden. Maturity learns to ask with sincerity and hold open hands. You can tell God exactly what you want. You don't have to pretend you don't care. Then you can also admit, I don't want this request to become the absolute center of my life. Reaching this space takes time. There will be days when you feel peace, and others when the urgency comes rushing back. It doesn't mean you're back at square one. The maturity doesn't move in a straight line. Every time you choose to trust again, you strengthen a new way of waiting. The answer might not have come yet, but you no longer talk to yourself so harshly. You still face doubts, though today you are able to ask for help. The future remains open, while the present slowly recovers its value. This shows that time is not empty. Something is taking shape. Waiting also teaches you discernment. When we want an answer so badly, any opportunity can seem right. Anxiety wants you to say yes quickly, just to end the uncertainty. Maturity looks at the fruit and asks if that brings truth alignment and a peace that remains long after the initial emotion. Examine whether that door demands that you abandon your values, ignore warning signs, or become a person you do not want to be. Not every quick answer arrives at the right moment. In certain cases, the not yet protects your ability to recognize what truly belongs with you. While you wait, avoid turning this time into an empty waiting room. Keep living. Care for those close to you. Learn, work, rest, and let joy find its space. Enjoying something good doesn't mean you forgot your prayer. Life wasn't placed entirely behind a single door. Perhaps one of the greatest signs of maturity is learning to smile again before receiving the answer. Not because you stopped caring, but because the problem lost the right to occupy your entire inner being. Even so, the desire remains. Perhaps today, you're wondering how much longer. I don't have a date to give you, nor would it be honest to promise that everything will happen exactly as you imagine. But I can remind you that time is never out of the hands of God. Your story hasn't been forgotten in an endless line. There is a tomorrow you don't yet know. The answer may be approaching quietly. Perhaps first a clarity will come, capable of changing the way you look at your prayer. A different door might also appear, showing you that you had limited your possibilities far too much. Mature waiting doesn't stop hoping. Learn to do so without dying a little each day from anxiety, and maybe just when you think nothing is moving, something new is already coming into your life. There are wounds that aren't always visible. A person can smile, work, and care for those they love, while deep inside they keep guarding a part of themselves that fears being hurt again. Life goes on, but certain experiences keep influencing how you trust, receive affection, and look at the future. Perhaps you have felt abandoned. Someone walked away when you needed them most. They changed without offering explanations or left you carrying questions that still find no answers. Since then, a part of you prepares for everyone else to do the same. When someone takes long to reply, anxiety creeps in. If a relationship experiences a normal distance, your mind imagines it's ending. You don't want to control, but the fear of being replaced turns every small change into a threat. Accumulated sadness can show up in quiet ways. You don't cry all the time. Maybe you don't even know how to say what you lost. You only notice that joy struggles to stay, and that things that once interested you no longer spark the same enthusiasm. God does not look at these wounds with impatience. He doesn't ask you why they still exist as if they were a spiritual failing. He draws near with the tenderness of one who knows every step of your journey and understands why certain reactions learn to protect you. Many behaviors you wish to change today, they started out as attempts to survive. Maybe you learned not to need anyone because people just weren't trustworthy. You started trying to control every single detail because you went through things that were completely unpredictable. You stopped showing your emotions because whenever you did, you were met with criticism or indifference. Those survival strategies might have helped you for a while, but now they might be keeping you from experiencing a different way of living. God doesn't force you to let go of those defenses all at once. He wants to show you that you don't have to constantly live in that same state of alert. Healing begins when you can look at a wound without letting it define your entire identity. What you went through is a part of your story, but it doesn't define all that you are. The abandonment you faced doesn't determine how all your future relationships will end. And betrayal doesn't doom every future connection to repeat that same painful experience. Even after being so exhausted for so long, it's still possible to learn a way to love and serve without destroying yourself in the process. Maybe you need to give yourself permission to feel. For a long time, you tried to quickly move past what happened. You told yourself that you had already forgiven. You kept working and avoided talking about it. Yet your body and your emotions held onto a memory that words just couldn't seem to erase. Feeling your pain doesn't mean you are sliding backward. You can grieve a past season of your life while still keeping your boundaries. You can miss someone and still recognize that the relationship shouldn't go back to the way it was. You can also admit that something hurt you deeply without letting it make you bitter. Truth opens up the space for healing. You don't have to downplay what happened to show your faith. God knows how serious it was. He knows the conversations and the moments that no one else ever saw. You don't need to convince him that your pain was real. You might never get the apology or the explanation that you've been waiting for. That reality hurts because a part of you still feels like closure depends on hearing those specific words. Yet, your peace doesn't have to remain forever in the hands of someone who chose silence. In God's presence, that chapter of your life can find closure, even if some questions are left unanswered. Closure doesn't always mean understanding every single reason. Sometimes it's simply deciding that the past will no longer have unlimited access to your present. Forgiveness, too, is something we must look at carefully. Forgiving doesn't mean calling the damage good, wiping away the consequences, or automatically going back to how things were. Trust can be rebuilt slowly, step by step, but only when there is consistency, accountability, and honesty. You can let go of the desire for revenge while still keeping a safe distance. Reconciliation requires the effort of both people. In some stories, it will be possible to build something new. In others, forgiveness will have to walk apart from closeness. God can give you the wisdom to recognize the yathiyisip difference. When the wound was caused by years of criticism, maybe today, you need to learn to speak to yourself differently. Your inner voice might have taken on the tone of those who put you down. You make a mistake and you call yourself useless. You get tired and you think you're just weak. You need help and you feel ashamed. That kind of cruelty doesn't bring about healthy growth. God can correct you without putting you to shame. You can also learn to recognize a mistake without tearing down your whole identity. Tell the truth. This didn't go well and I need to fix it. Then stop yourself from adding a sentence of condemnation like, nothing about me is worth anything. His grace allows you to learn. In some cases, healing will require the support of others. A safe conversation, wise guidance, or professional counseling can become instruments of God. Reaching out for help doesn't mean you lack faith. Sometimes it is the very answer to a responsible prayer. You don't have to share your story with just anyone. Find people who can listen without turning your vulnerability into judgment, gossip, or a weapon. Trust doesn't need to be given all at once. Watch for consistency, respect for your boundaries, and how someone reacts when they don't get exactly what they want. Your heart shouldn't stay closed forever, but you don't have to open it up without wisdom either. With God's help, you will learn to receive love without doubting every gesture. Today, maybe you don't need an explanation. You just need to feel that you are not alone as you heal. Imagine for a moment that God is drawing near to that part of you that you've guarded for years. He isn't in a rush. He doesn't demand that you get right back up, nor does he ask why you aren't over it yet. He sits down right beside you. He knows the wound, your story, and how hard you fought just to keep going. His presence won't magically wipe away the past, but it starts stripping away its power to dictate your entire future. Take a breath. You don't have to heal in a single day. Let grace reach a part of you that used to stay hidden. Maybe your healing began the very moment you stopped pretending nothing was wrong and accepted that your heart deserves to be cared for too. Today, you can start looking at your story from a different perspective. Fear might still show up, but it doesn't have to run your life anymore. The past will still offer lessons, but it won't have the power to turn a painful experience into a life sentence for your future. Under God's grace, even guilt can stop being a prison and become an invitation to heal, learn, and keep going. You haven't been abandoned in the middle of what is still left unfinished. Fear won't be the one writing your story. It might show up, but you'll learn to listen to it, examine it, and respond with truth. Your past experiences will give you wisdom. They won't be a life sentence. A betrayal doesn't mean you'll never find a safe relationship. A mistake doesn't take away your ability to learn. A closed door doesn't hold the entire purpose of your life. God is still working with you, not because you've managed to keep a perfect faith, but because His grace remains throughout the process. And He can correct your direction without withdrawing His presence. Your story is not falling behind. Someone else's pace doesn't define yours, and comparison doesn't know all that God is shaping in silence. What seems small to someone else might represent a profound victory on your path. Nor will waiting be a room where life is suspended. You will keep loving, learning, and nurturing what is already in your hands. The answer is still important, but it isn't allowed to take away the value of each day before its arrival. There is still goodness ahead of you. You don't know exactly what form it will take. It might show up as an answer, an opportunity, a healthier relationship, or a peace that arrives slowly. You don't need to map out the future to keep your heart open. God knows paths that you haven't even traveled yet. That's why this season won't be treated as the end. It might be difficult, confusing, or longer than you wanted. Even so, it's still just a part, not the whole story. Your identity remains safe in God's hands. It doesn't depend entirely on someone else's approval, a professional outcome, or how fast you manage to heal. You are loved as you learn and accompanied as you rebuild your strength. Today, you can rest in a quiet authority. You don't need to shout to believe. It's enough to know that your life is not beyond God's reach, that His presence remains steady, and that no painful experience gets the final word. Now your heart can let its guard down a little. Not because every single issue is resolved, but because you don't have to solve them all right now. The battle doesn't depend solely on your own strength. You can lay down your inner sword for just a few minutes. Breathe calmly and let God take care of what you cannot seem to hold. You've carried too much for far too long. Maybe you've grown so used to the weight that you don't even realize how much exhaustion is built up inside you. You keep thinking, anticipating, fixing, and managing as if stopping for just a few minutes would cause everything to spiral out of control. But you don't have to keep fighting. You can rest. You don't need to find the answer to every question today or decide right now what happens next. Life will keep moving forward. Even if during this moment you stop, watching over it, breathe slowly as you breathe in. Remember that God is here. As you exhale, let some of that tension leave you. It might take your body a moment to realize it can let its guard down. Don't force it, just be still. You've done the best you could with the strength, information, and awareness you had. Maybe there are things that will need fixing tomorrow. For now, you can acknowledge them without having to solve them all. Rest is not irresponsibility. It prepares you to see with greater clarity the things that exhaustion had made confusing. Your mind might try to return to worry. When that happens, don't argue with it for several minutes. Gently tell it, I don't have to figure this out right now. Then breathe again. God doesn't sleep. While you rest, He continues to be God. He doesn't need your vigilance to remain present in your family's life, in the decision that worries you, or in the future that you don't yet know. You can let go of control a little. Perhaps you won't manage to surrender everything all at once. That's okay. Offer the Lord the part that you can open up today. Letting go can also be gradual. Think of what weighs on you the most. There is no need to explain it again. God already knows every detail of the conversations and the fears that accompany this situation. Imagine leaving that burden before Him. You aren't pretending that it stopped mattering. You are recognizing that you cannot continue carrying it entirely alone. Now the pace is going to slow down. You don't need to do anything but remain with an open heart. Let's join together in an intimate prayer, unhurried and without complicated words. Allow this prayer to be a place of rest. You can listen in silence, repeat a phrase, or simply breathe as each word is brought before God. Let's pray together. Beloved Father, we come to you in this moment without masks, without prepared speeches, and without the need to prove that we are strong. You know the whole story. You know which seasons filled us with joy and which ones we still struggle to understand. You know what part of the journey we have walked with a weariness that almost no one notices. That is why, Lord, before asking you for any answer, we want to acknowledge your presence. Thank you for not walking away during the confusing days. Thank you for staying close even when our emotions told us otherwise. Maybe we didn't always manage to feel you, but today we choose to remember that your faithfulness doesn't depend on what we feel. Father, look with tenderness upon every weary mind listening to this prayer. There are people who have gone several nights without fully resting. The body lies down, but their thoughts keep racing. They replay conversations, imagine scenarios, and try to solve problems that don't even have an answer yet. We ask that your peace reach those thoughts, not as a demand to stop feeling, but as a presence capable of gently sorting out whatever has become too noisy. Help us return to the present. Remind us that grace for tomorrow will come with tomorrow, and that today we only need the light for this next step. Lord, we place our fear of the future before you. You know the questions about work, family health, finances, and the decisions we still don't know how to make. You know how many times we try to rush ahead just to avoid another disappointment. Give us the wisdom to prepare without living under the weight of anxiety. Show us what is truly in our hands and what we must leave under your care. When we try to control the people we love, remind us that you are also present in their journeys. We can walk beside them, listen, and help, but we cannot make every decision for them. Protect our families, Lord. Enter into the homes where there is tension, silence, and unspoken conversations. Bring peace to those who no longer know how to speak without hurting each other. Give us the humility to admit mistakes, the patience to listen, and the courage to speak the truth with respect. Look upon the children who have drifted away, the worried parents, and the families going through a difficult time. Do not let fear destroy our bonds before there is even an opportunity for healing. At the same time, give us the wisdom to set boundaries where needed and to seek help when a situation becomes too heavy to carry alone. Father, we lay before you the wounds of abandonment. Draw close to those who still fear that everyone will leave them. Hold the person who sees every distance as a sign of rejection, and help them realize that a past experience has no power to write all of their future relationships. Heal the wounds of betrayal as well. We saw what happened to the words that were spoken and the trust that was broken. We are not asking you to erase our memories, but to take away from those wounds the power to rule over every new relationship. Teach us to trust with wisdom, not closing our hearts forever, but also not ignoring the fruits, the patterns, and the warning signs that need attention. Lord, look at the sadness that is built up. There are people who kept pushing forward when inside they desperately needed to stop. They cared for others, handled everything, and hid their own pain because they didn't want to be a burden. Today, we ask you to make them feel seen. Help them realize that they deserve to be cared for too. Bring wise people close to them, people who can listen without judgment and without rushing their healing. When it is time to seek support, guidance, or professional help, give us the humility to do so. May we never use our faith as an excuse to keep hiding what truly needs attention. Beloved Father, restore our hope. Not a naive hope that denies reality, but a quiet confidence that no difficult season holds everything you have left to do. When a door closes, please do not let us think that our entire future was shut away with it. If an answer is slow to come, help us to keep living. When our direction needs to change, give us the grace to adjust our path without viewing every change as a defeat. You already know the parts of our lives we haven't lived yet. You know what encounters, lessons, and opportunities might be part of them. You also know the strength we will need and the way you will walk beside us. Do not let us imagine the future without including your presence. Father, we surrender our guilt to you from past decisions. Show us what we need to acknowledge and make right. Give us the courage to ask for forgiveness, accept the consequences, and act in a more wise way. Once we have done our part, free us from beating ourselves up. Remind us that true repentance doesn't lock us in our mistakes. It leads us toward a different life. Help us receive your grace. For a long time, maybe we thought we had to get better away from you before returning. Today, we realize we need to draw close, precisely because we are still being restored. Don't let us treat your love as a reward meant only for the good days. Teach us to live as children who can always come back home, Father. Bring a healing to boost to our relationship with rest. Free us from thinking that our worth depends on producing, solving problems, or being available to everyone. Teach us to recognize our limits, ask for help, and stop before we reach burnout. May we sleep without feeling that the world depends on us keeping watch. As we close our eyes, remind us that you stay awake. Lord, if anyone listening to this prayer today feels completely alone, let your presence become their refuge. We aren't asking that every emotion fades away immediately. We just ask that they understand they won't have to go through it alone. Draw near in the night, in the quiet, home on the commute to work, and in the moments when no one else knows what to say. Use people words, memories of your faithfulness, and small gestures of care to show that the path isn't empty. Father, help us recognize your work in the little things. We might be waiting for an extraordinary sign, but you have already placed in front of us a conversation, an idea, or a simple opportunity. Give us the humility to start without having everything figured out. May we not look down on small steps or give up too quickly on what needs time to take root. Teach us to be faithful in the present moment, to take good care of what we already have, to speak the truth, to love with healthy boundaries, and to carry out our responsibilities without making them the absolute measure of our identity. May faith stop being just a word we hear and become the way we live our ordinary days. Father, today we acknowledge before you that our story is still open, not because we ignore what we've lived, but because we trust that your grace remains available. This current season doesn't have the final say. Our wounds don't define all of our identity. Fear won't be the only thing writing our future decisions. You are still here. Stay with us when the answer comes, and also if our direction needs to change. Walk with us through the preparation, the fulfillment, and the responsibilities that every blessing brings. We don't want to only chase after your gifts. We want to learn to walk with you through every part of the journey. Thank you, Father, for hearing this prayer. We receive the peace we are able to receive today, even if it still seems small. We accept that some processes take time, and we trust that you won't abandon your work halfway through. We place our minds, our families, our future, and everything we still don't understand into your hands. In Jesus' name, amen. May God bless you abundantly, strengthen your heart, and remind you throughout this day that your story isn't over, and that you'll never have to walk it alone. Here on this channel, you'll find new messages to help you breathe again, draw closer to God, and remember His Word. We hope this space can be like a small altar of hope, where you can pause in the midst of the noise and reconnect with the presence of the Lord. Share this message with someone who needs to hear this today. Subscribe and come back tomorrow, because God still has more to say to you. Yes. Remember, here you'll always have a space to breathe, believe, and start over.